The National Guard will not be armed. They're in a mission support role behind the scenes.
Marching orders at the border and the ground rules for the California National Guard.
From plankton to fish and to humans that eat seafood, plastic pollution is changing the very chemistry of life.
It may be the next step in cleaning up a San Diego problem, the ban that could help protect marine wildlife. And on the campaign trail, candidates for governor share their affordable housing solutions. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego County has launched a pilot program to provide health care and treatment to homeless people with frequent visits to the ER. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy tells us the goal is to connect people to services while saving millions in Medi-Cal cost.
Teams of outreach workers in January were given a list of more than 1,000 names of homeless people living on the streets of San Diego. Each person had accumulated $20,000 or more in Medi-Cal costs over the past year.
This program provides intensive care management services for up to 2 years.
Susan Bauer is Assistant Director of Integrated Services with the county's Health and Human Services Agency. She says the Whole Person Wellness Program brings health care and other services to people who are chronically homeless and are suffering from severe mental illness, a substance abuse disorder, or physical illness.
So that they can become stable and not hit the hospital, not hit the emergency departments, not go to jail.
The people are teamed up with case managers, health workers, and a housing navigator who guide them through an array of services.
They go out onto the streets and work with the individual. They don't have the person come to the office.
The team connects individuals to appropriate medical care, resulting in fewer expensive trips to the emergency room.
They may not need to go to an emergency department all the time, but that's the one that they know. And so maybe what we can do is have the clinic be the one that they know. And so they go to the clinic instead.
Bauer says a major challenge has been tracking down the people on the list, so a change has been implemented to allow hospitals to directly contact the program.
If they see individuals who are frequently coming in over and over, you hear about hospital emergency departments knowing someone on their first name because they come in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, that they can just refer them in and they don't necessarily have to be on a predisposed list.
Bauer says that opens the gates for more people to be enrolled in the program. So far, just 53 are signed up, with another 150 in the outreach phase. The 3-year pilot program is paid for by a $22 million federal grant that the county is matching. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Autopsy results may help explain what led to the death of a transgender migrant who was detained by immigration officers. Authorities say the 33-year-old woman from Honduras died Friday at an Albuquerque hospital. Activists say she was part of a caravan of migrants that traveled to the U.S. border through Mexico. President Trump criticized the group on Twitter, saying they should not be allowed to enter the U.S. Authorities say the woman was admitted to the hospital after showing signs of pneumonia, dehydration, and complications associated with HIV. She was the 6th detainee to die in ICE custody since October 2017. It's been about 2 months since President Trump called for the National Guard to be deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border. In California, about 400 troops are on border duty. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh reports the Guard is keeping a low profile.
The National Guard quietly arrived in San Diego in early May. Volunteers drove to the armory in Kearny Mesa in their own cars. They attended a briefing before fanning out to find hotel rooms. The Guard has released only short written updates, and troops have appeared publicly only briefly. A week after they arrived, the first Guardsmen marched out of the El Centro Border Patrol Station, 2 hours east of San Diego.
Ready, front, move, ready, rest.
They stood silently as the backdrop for a press conference called by the local head of Customs and Border Protection, Gloria Chavez.
CBP continues to welcome National Guard personnel to the southwest border.
Call it cooperation in the age of Twitter. While the president challenges Governor Jerry Brown's position on just about everything, especially immigration, behind the scenes, the state and federal government quietly worked through their differences. 250 of the 400 National Guard troops Brown authorized have arrived at the U.S. Border Patrol districts of El Centro and San Diego. Chavez laid out some of the ground rules.
These 51 National Guardsmen behind me will assist the U.S. Border Patrol with logistical and administrative support.
Far from the image of Humvees riding along the border, the majority of California Guardsmen won't even be outdoors. They'll analyze intelligence and act as dispatchers to free up Border Patrol agents. Under the rules negotiated with the Pentagon, they'll monitor cameras on the U.S. side of the border, but not cameras that look across the border into Mexico.
The National Guard will not be armed. They're in a mission support role behind the scenes.
The troops then filed out without speaking. The fact that Guardsmen won't be armed also isn't new. Tim Dunn with Salisbury University has researched militarization of the border and says the Pentagon has been reluctant to arm troops since 1997. That's when Marines from Camp Pendleton, California, shot and killed a rancher outside of Redford, Texas, whom they mistook as a smuggler.
So they scaled back the use of armed ground troops and allowed all the other forms of military assistance, intelligence support, construction, training, equipment, loaning, equipment operation. Anything short of armed ground troops could be done.
Dunn says it stayed that way until the Pentagon resumed some armed patrols in the years after 9/11. The Secretary of Defense or one of his deputies now has to sign off on this kind of operation. The Pentagon estimates it will cost $182 million to keep Guard troops activated at the border through September. The government spent roughly $1.35 billion to send Guard troops to the border during the Bush and Obama administrations. Dunn questions the value.
What are we getting for that? The apprehensions are at historic lows. We have agents averaging 1 or 2 apprehensions per month. There's very little for most of them to do. Even though apprehensions are up a little bit this year, they've been low since 2011.
But Scott, the Border Patrol sector chief, says there's plenty for the Guardsmen to do. He says the Border Patrol is understaffed and has a recruiting problem, in part because of the high cost of living in San Diego.
Now I have significant vacancies in that area that they can help fill. On top of that, we have significant vacancies anyway. I think it's no secret we've had some recruiting challenges.
So even if the Guard performs mundane tasks like changing the oil in vehicles, that frees up agents.
We have a very small mission support contingency. We don't have a big engineering group, for example. We either have to take agents out of a role to do that short term, or we have to contract those services out.
Scott also says this kind of cooperation is fairly routine. Guardsmen already monitor cameras at stations all the way up the California coastline.
We've got a long relationship with the National Guard. We've been working with them through my entire career. There's always been some type of Guard presence. That's been 25 years.
Scott says this first wave of troops will mainly act as dispatchers. He sees the Guard as a temporary solution, but one he'd like to see continue for a while. He hopes Operation Guardian Support will last beyond its September 30th sunset. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
2 San Diego City Council members are pushing legislation that could lead to a citywide ban on styrofoam and limit the use of other plastics. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Councilmember Chris Ward wants city officials to start the process that could lead to a citywide styrofoam ban by the fall. The material is used to make cups, plates, and other food containers. Ward says the city has done a great job paying attention to environmental issues, and he calls this another step toward cleaning up a local problem.
We must begin now to take steps that not only reduce our impact, but prevent pollution at the source. It is time that San Diego join over 100 communities across the state of California and ban expanded polystyrene, or what we commonly refer to as styrofoam.
Ward is also looking for limits on plate utensils and straws. The move is being cheered by clean water groups. Five Gyres board member Roger Kuby says all the plastic in the environment is expensive to clean up, and it puts human health at risk.
An average of 8 million tons of plastic ends up in our oceans every year. Once there, it breaks down into smaller particles called microplastics, which absorb and concentrate toxins and chemicals up the marine food chain and into our bodies.
And areas like this are what city council members are hoping to protect. They want to keep those small plastic particles out of the water so that they can protect it for recreational uses and also protect marine life. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Disposable plastic straws may be a thing of the past in California. State Assembly members have advanced a bill that would allow dine-in restaurants to provide single-use plastic straws only by request. Fines could add up to $300. Critics say the measure makes it harder for restaurants to do business in California. San Diego has been called the craft beer capital for its abundance of small breweries. Now, one of the local little guys has recruited a big beer executive to take the reins. Green Flash Brewing has appointed Michael Taylor to CEO. Taylor was part of Anheuser-Busch's management team. The Mira Mesa-based company says Taylor was brought in to strengthen its brand. The beer maker, known for its IPAs, is set to open a new brew house in Lincoln, Nebraska. The city of San Marcos has appointed an outside attorney to investigate a complaint against Mayor Jim Desmond. The complaint claims that he violated city campaign finance laws as part of his run for the County Board of Supervisors. iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda has the details.
Realtor Anna Roosevelt filed a campaign finance complaint against Mayor Desmond with the city and the state's Fair Political Practices Commission. She says Desmond received contributions too close to when 6 donors had development projects voted on by the city council. San Marcos requires a 12-month gap between campaign contributions and council votes. Roosevelt is happy the city is investigating her complaint.
It's so amazing that someone is taking us seriously and listening to us, and that the process is working the way it's supposed to.
A spokesman for the state commission confirmed it also had received the complaint, but declined to comment further. The agency's enforcement division reviews all complaints before deciding whether to investigate. Desmond, a Republican, is running for Supervisor Bill Horn's open seat. A spokesman for Desmond's campaign says he doesn't believe the city's campaign laws apply in the county supervisor's race. The complaint cites contributions from donors involved with the San Marcos Highlands project and donors involved with the 220-unit Brookfield residential project. The city council approved both projects. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. It's crunch time for the primary election in California. Democrat Gavin Newsom and Republican John Cox are leading in the polls for the governor's race. The new survey from UC Berkeley shows Newsom with a 33% lead. Cox is in second place. Democrat Antonio Villaraigosa and Republican Travis Allen are trailing behind. The top 2 candidates move on to the general election in November. The cost of housing has been one of the most talked about issues on the campaign trail. Cal Matters asked the top 6 candidates for governor what would they do to make living in California more affordable.
Well, I do think we should try to use as many carrots as we can. So one of the things that I've proposed is bringing back redevelopment. Redevelopment is one thing that you can give as an incentive. You can create some additional resources, and I know the state's trying to do that, but not enough. We need to get more money for affordable housing. And then if people don't play by the rules, then we go to the more ham-handed approach where we tell locals, you must create this much affordable housing.
And the reason that rents are going up in California, the reason that the median cost of a home in California is over $500,000 when it's only about $346,000 nationally, is because there is not enough supply of housing in California. Starts out with CEQA reform, then it goes on to reducing the taxation and all of the impact fees that these developers have to pay, taking a look at zoning restrictions, giving more power to the locals again and taking them away from the state agencies, and essentially doing everything we can to give developers and people that actually want to build housing capacity in California the tools that they need to begin building new capacities.
When it came back, I didn't vote for Costa-Hawkins. But looking back, I'm not sure I was right, frankly. I do believe that we have to address spiraling rents, and I do believe that some kind of rent stabilization is important. I don't believe that the feds ought to be, dictating to a neighborhood what they ought to do any more than the state should. So I want to start with incentives, which is why I've talked about a housing trust fund and a revolving fund for ADUs.
I want to have that conversation. I don't want to have a state dictate. Obviously markets are different throughout the state. I want to be responsive. Some of the things that I've tried to do and the authorities that I've sit on is to provide a menu of options, recognizing you want local participants to be able to have a voice, to be able to participate in their democracy. They have duly elected representatives. Let's make sure that democratic process actually works.
I think that if you mean should we repeal the Ellis Act, or rather should we repeal Costa-Hawkins, which would afford that, I am concerned that it would have a chilling effect on housing production in the state. Do I believe in rent control? I'm former mayor of San Francisco. Do I believe that we need to do more on preservation and on protection, not just production? Absolutely. And owner move-in evictions, Ellis Act evictions, and making sure we're providing legal support, counseling services, not just rental subsidies for people that are on the cusp of displacement is profoundly important. I think there's a potential compromise. I know not everyone agrees with that, but the issue of affordability is the issue.
If you look around the world and you look and you know anything about economic history, you know that the history of price controls is not good. They never, ever work. You get less investment. I want to see affordable housing. I want to see the cost of housing come down. And the law of supply and demand has not been repealed. The only way to truly bring down the cost of any good or any service is with competition and supply.
That report was produced by Cal Matters, a nonprofit journalism group that helps explain how the state capitol works and why it matters. Most of the members of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors have been in office for more than 20 years. That will change for District 4 after this year's election. It's currently represented by termed-out Supervisor Ron Roberts. Attorney Omar Passons is one of 5 candidates running for his seat. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John spoke with him about his campaign.
Well, homelessness is a big issue, and the county desperately needs more affordable housing. But land use is one of the responsibilities that the supervisors have out in the unincorporated areas. And there have been some very controversial big developments like Lilac Hills that the voters rejected not so long ago. Where do you stand on these big new developments out in the unincorporated areas?
Well, I think we need to be careful to not lump every possible development into the same pot just because it's in an unincorporated area. I think most San Diegans don't fully know that Rancho San Diego is unincorporated and under the county's land use authority. As a land use attorney, I'm somebody that has that background, the only candidate. Bonita, another place where the county has authority. So those are examples of places where you could see, good, appropriate, transit-oriented development. We got to bring the transportation alternatives, and we're looking at shared autonomous shuttles and some interesting technology there. But so while I don't agree with some of these larger sort of leapfrog developments the way they're currently conceived, I do think that we have to be smarter because we have a housing crisis, and it's why, rather than just give sound bites and platitudes, I released a detailed plan called Housing for All that you can find linked to on our issues page.
Okay, well, since people are very concerned about homelessness and affordable housing, what are some of the things you would do for housing if you were elected?
Right. So the issues around housing and homelessness and affordable housing are both market solutions and subsidized solutions. And I'm the only candidate that's attacking both of those things. The reality is it's wildly uncertain and expensive and fraught with regulatory hurdles, some of which aren't necessary, as it relates to market side. So the only thing that pencils out for a developer is overpriced condos that nobody can afford. If we want to change that, we need to incentivize the early stage, the sort of entry-level housing on the market side. And on the subsidized side, I flat out just call for a long-term localized source of funding for affordable housing.
Okay, now the Sheriff's Department is part of the county, and there have been some reports suggesting that there have been unacceptable levels of deaths and suicides in the county jails. What could you do about that if elected?
there's a wide range of roles that the Board of Supervisors plays. You have to understand the Board of Supervisors is kind of like the Board of Directors of a company. There is no mayor, such as it were, in the county, so the Board of Supervisors sets the policy direction. It makes a decision on the budget and then has a chief executive, a woman named Helen Robbins Meyer, who then gets with her 17,000 employees to make the sort of policy direction happen. What the county can do, and this is important, what the county supervisors can do is to say, we're going to put more resources into mental health support so that people who are in the jail system aren't just getting their support while they're there, but before they go in and after they get out. I think we need better accountability, and we need to use the power of the purse to drive better decision making about how criminal justice reform happens and how we investigate and shed light on problems in our system.
The county board recently voted to back the Trump administration's suit against the sanctuary city laws. This has been very controversial. Where would you stand on that?
Well, you know, I was interviewed about that. I was fortunate to be endorsed by the San Diego Union Tribune, which did a thorough analysis of all the candidates and decided that I was the one most qualified and ready to lead. And one of the things they asked before the actual decision came out was, where do you stand? And what I said was this, before a decision was made. I'm a lawyer, so I read the actual lawsuit and have advised public entities. And there is no exposure for the County of San Diego, and I think it was wrong to go into that lawsuit. I think it's more of a political stunt or sort of a mean-spirited thing that's going to make us less safe because our communities will be less likely to report crime.
So you have never run for elected office before, although you've worked a lot in the community. What made you decide to run for the County Board of Supervisors? You know, I get this question a lot as the only candidate with actual experience working at the federal government level, the only candidate with a background in public health and a land use degree and a career in land use. I've worked with federal, state, and local officials, but I'm not a career politician. For me, as somebody who grew up in San Diego's foster care system, I saw firsthand. My life is proof that if we better support children from birth, all of the other outcomes get better. Homelessness, crime, opportunity. So for me, whether it's children on the one hand or really supporting our many seniors who are struggling on the other, my experience, professional and otherwise, make me best suited to be the next supervisor. Well, Omar Passons, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Our election coverage continues online at kpbs.org/election. Watch our candidate interviews and check out our KPBS Voters Guide. We will also have special live coverage of election results next Tuesday night at 10.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and North Korea delegates meet to discuss plans for the two leaders meeting. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Mild May weather will stick around for now, but Justin Pavic has more on a weekend warm-up in tonight's forecast.
Well, the marine layer is still in full effect, and we definitely saw a result of that earlier on today. The depth of that marine layer, quite extensive, led to some morning mist. The clouds will continue, though inland it will actually be warming up here the next couple of days. Later on Friday, especially Saturday, some temperatures as much as 10 degrees above normal. And eventually, even out toward the coast, we'll start to warm things up as well. But it's pretty quiet aside from the marine layer. No large-scale storm systems around. It's a little bit of a wet commute well north along Interstate 80. Otherwise, no showers around. But again, for tonight, clouding up toward the shoreline. Overnight low temperatures dropping down into the upper 50s. Again, that'll be the case again around Chula Vista, out toward Oceanside, but well removed from the coast. We're dry and pretty comfortable around Mount Laguna, crisp, I should say, into the mid-40s. Borrego Springs down into the mid-60s. And for tomorrow, morning clouds, late day sunshine, pretty much where we should be for this time of the year around San Diego, but just inland where the marine layer will not have an impact. And this will be more of a decreasing impact over time the next couple of days. We'll be talking about some sunshine and some 70s out there. Borrego Springs pushing toward the century mark. So far this month, we've received as much rain as we should have in the overall grand scheme of things. Still talking about a moderate to severe droughts and will stay dry as we venture toward the weekend. There will be a little bit of storminess south toward the Baja. Not really impactful for us all that much, though. Check out the coast here and notice temperatures warming up. Less low clouds, more sunshine, back into the mid-70s as we venture into Sunday and Monday. Inland, same result here. More sun means warmer temperatures, mid-80s. Sunday, Monday, low clouds perhaps breaking as we venture into Tuesday, and a little breezy here as we talk about the mountainous terrain. Notice temperatures also climbing through the 70s back into the 80s. It's a dry stretch here, as well as the deserts. But notice the torrid heat. We're talking about numbers approaching 110 degrees as we venture into Sunday, with overnight lows here only falling off into the 70s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back over to you, Ebony.
Pro football returns to San Diego, but not the NFL.
Can you just tell us? We're dying to know where you're going. No, we're not telling anybody what the city is yet. We want it to be a surprise.
No.
Some of your coaches.
We're going to San Diego. Yeah. San Diego!
The Alliance of America Football League made it official today. The league debuts next February after the Super Bowl. The San Diego team will play against 8 teams, and home games will be held at the former home of the Chargers in Mission Valley. Now here's a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, a cool sweet treat for summer. The Planet Money podcast looks at the economics of ice cream. And on Midday Edition, what's new, what's notable, and what are they frying up this year at the San Diego County Fair? That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.